Hello and welcome. This is day 3 of the CAS Virtual Showcase. You have joined the webinar entitled Embedding Key Computing Skills in Early Years and Foundation Stage Settings. This webinar is part of the CAS Virtual Showcase, which is a 2-week window of webinars designed to support the CAS community. I am Wendy McLeod and I am the CAS Community Outreach Manager for communities across London and the East of England. Joining me this morning is the presenter of the session, Vicki Dodds. Vicki has 17 years experience of providing high quality computing curriculums across the primary age range, including EYFS. She has held several computing leadership roles in schools across LEAs in the northeast of England. Her experience includes leading inset training, future-proofing school computing infrastructure, supporting teachers in the provision of computing, and mapping out software and assessment. In 2017, Vicki founded Computing for Kids Northeast, to focus her passion and experience in computing towards supporting schools across the region to utilise technology to teach their entire curriculum more effectively. In January 2020, Vicki became the primary lead teacher for the NCCE Computing Hub, covering Newcastle, Gateshead, Durham and Cumbria, based at Cardinal Hume Catholic School. She now supports teachers and schools to develop their skills through the provision of government-funded CPD. In recent years, Vicki has joined a number of organisations. She is a Barefoot ambassador and leads the CAS Kingston Park community. During the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. All attendees are in listen-only mode. The top of the window has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. If you would like to take notes as Vicki is presenting, there is a handout for you to download in the handouts section. And if you're using social media, the hashtag for the event is hashtag CASVirtual20. I'm going to hand over now to Vicki for the presentation.
Hi everyone. If you would just like to put a Y in the chat if you're here, just to let me know how many people we've got into the conference. And welcome. I'm really pleased that we've got so many people here for an early years session. Now I'm just going to check with Wendy that I am sharing my screen and that everything's okay, and then we're going to get started. So I've had that introduction, so I won't go through this screen, but just to kind of show you who I am and that I am a primary teacher. So let me just pop that back on. So, first of all, this is a key document that I use in my early years work. I was a Key Stage 2 teacher trained, but very quickly really enjoyed the work that I did with kind of early years children and what that provided, the opportunity it provided for my own CPD really. So this is a key document that I've been using, Development Matters in the Early Years. Key things about this document that I think are fantastic is it's all about encapsulating that idea of learning through play, looking at the learner and identifying the learner that you have in front of you and how they are different to other children in the classroom. So, for example, I've just picked out key things. They're able and eager to learn. They love to interact with other children. And it's all to do with positive, using a positive relationship between the children and enabling those environments. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm really keen to kind of get your ideas on. So I will be asking you in the chat just to put a yes or no, or just give me your thoughts really. So as we go through, you'll see some poll questions. In that poll, all I want you to do is just put a yes or no in the chat facility for me, and then we can talk through. But the idea of this session is to look through the pedagogy of early years classrooms, including, you know, kind of lower key stage 1 as well, really, and how we progress and how we encapsulate computing in our setting, in the early years setting. So I'm just going to quickly pop that back on there. Right, let's move on. Poll 1. just in the chat, if you can pop it in, that would be fantastic. But do you think computing should be taught in the early years setting as part of the early years provision? And if you can pop that into the chat, that would be fantastic.
Lots of people saying yes.
Fantastic.
One person said unplugged only. Or informally. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I put that question in is because obviously the early years setting, when you look at the objectives, it doesn't really push that computing should be used. And I think this is an area that the children absolutely love it. And if we think about where they come in now with regards to their ability, I've got a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I know that my 4-year-old is well equipped to go in and start using computing and start understanding why we have computers, why computers are being used, because it's an intrinsic part of our society today. So to take it out of the early years setting, I think would be doing them an injustice, really, because they come in well above where they should be, most children. You do have those children in specific areas that obviously don't have as much opportunity to use technology, but I think it's so important that children are still using it and have that opportunity, either through unplugged activities, which I'm going to talk about today, or through scaffolded activities. This is where I would say it's the big part that I'm an avid believer in, is scaffolding the activity and being there as part of their learning process. So just going to make sure this is back on so you can see me. So what I've done here is I've just popped on here a couple of the areas that it isn't computer-based objectives, but if we look at them, we're encouraging children in the early years to be active learners and to be motivated, to have a real engagement in the activity that we're asking them to do, because their concentration levels aren't at that point where they can concentrate for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. We want to kind of encapsulate that little activity and get them engaged straight away. Persevering, these are really, as children move up through school, especially up into Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, this idea of perseverance is one of the most key features, I think, that I tend to push when I'm in the classroom, and enjoying what they're doing, talking about what they're doing, and talking to their friends about their thoughts and their different ideas as well, which is really important. Making links to things like creative thinking and thinking critically. What I'll do is I'll show you a few resources that I tend to use in my classrooms when I teach, and I teach over many different schools in many different areas. So the catchment area, some of the children do come into school well below the level that they should be in, and through that plain engagement, I tend to find that when you organise activities, the plain engagement and the idea of exploration, and just the children are willing to have a go. But what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit more about gender a little bit later on with regards to this. So I'm just going to move back to poll 2. Are the children in your class, if you're an early years teacher, if you're a Key Stage 1 teacher, are the children in your class able to actually access computing on a weekly basis? If you want to pop that into the chat, that would be fantastic. And then Wendy will talk to me about the ideas that you have.
I think there's a mixture of responses, actually. It's more of a 50-50. We've got some people saying not every day, not at the moment. Some people saying yes, a laptop. They teach it during PPA throughout the school. Yes, but limited resources. So really mixed response, mixed picture there, Vicki.
A lot of it, I would say, is that we tend to find the resources that we need for early years and foundation stage need to be robust. So I'll be showing you a couple of the resources that I tend to use with children. Having as part of a scaffolded learning an activity that you lead with the children, and the children invited to come over if they would like to have a go at it, is kind of a way that I tend to teach it. So I'm going to start going through a couple of the aspects of why computing in the early years is so important, to be honest. So this is from the Barefoot website. If you haven't seen the Barefoot resources, I do recommend that you go on, because there's some fantastic ones in there. Even with regards to some of the activities for SEND are, I think, are fantastic for early years children as well. So the idea, if you see me just moving between two screens, I'm just looking at this presentation so that I can go through it with you. So the computational thinking is is not just programming and computer science, it's based on computing in general. And it's this idea that we have concepts such as logic, evaluation, algorithms and patterns. We're asking children to make sense, follow instructions. These are all key objectives that we want to teach in the early years setting. Deciding out of things, for example, decomposition, breaking down a problem into its parts and wondering what to do next. And some children come in well equipped with these skills, but some children don't when they come into the early years settings. So setting this as a foundation in early years and foundation stage is fantastic. Deciding what they need to sort a problem out. This isn't just computational thinking, it's to do with general thinking in the nursery stage or early years setting, should I say. And the other side of the poster talks about the approaches such as things like tinkering, having a go at things and seeing how things work, being very creative, thinking about how you might use computing to aid another activity that you're going to do, debugging, fixing problems. We tend to really be fantastic in the early years, asking children to try and solve their own problems and have a go first before an adult intervenes. In some ways, I think this is lost as children go up through school, sadly, because they want the answer to be right. They don't want to work towards the answer. And I think this is a key thing, that if a lot of teachers from Key Stage 2, Key Stage 1 came down into early years and saw this, it's an eye-opener for them. And collaborating, working as little teams and getting children to work in teams, mixed teams, teams of just boys, teams of just girls, because the thinking is different. I mean, I've observed this in years and years of being in the early years and foundation stage setting and doing profiles on children. So this is just from the Development Matters document. I think I've made links to this in the handout, so if you do need this, or you can access it really easily. But what I've done is I've just pulled out key aspects of this, such as observing each child's development and learning and assessing progress. Having these little computational thinking activities or computing activities allows you to sit back and look and ask the correct questions of the children, and especially a scaffolded activity where it's designed, where you have an idea of what the outcomes might actually be. For example, stimulating resources. Children are keen to learn. They're like sponges. They'll come over and learn if an activity is set up with stimulating and relevant resources. And I do a lot of topic teaching. If you are doing topics, books in schools, in your setting, should I say, use them. Don't go away and start making new activities, because you've got the resources there. So it's just about manipulating them and making them work for you in terms of using them in a computing sense. Rich learning opportunities through play. I do a lot of work where I invite children over, or different types of children over, depending on what their strengths are, and get them to work as teams. Supporting children to take risks and explore, asking them those questions, not doing it for them, but asking them the right question to encourage them to have a go at something. Also identifying children learn in different ways. They're different styles of learners. I did, when I was at university, I did my my main kind of document on learning styles, and I followed a group of children over a long period of time, and it's so obvious that children have such different learning styles, or they're a combination of kinesthetic learners, or active learners, or visual learners, or auditory learners. So making sure those activities really suit those types of children, and the practitioner teaching the children through play, through challenging play, just being slightly above where the children might be, so to push them on a little bit more. So I'm going to move on again, just quickly click on that screen just so I don't lose it. There. One moment. There. Sorry, it's just jumping between two screens here. I'll just pop my screen back on. There we are. Oh, it's not moving on. Let me see. There we are. There. So just to give you a little bit of background in what I've done in the last probably 3 to 4 years, I follow a group of children in a nursery setting, and I followed this particular boy in the middle from 2.5 years old. He's now currently 4. And the idea about this was with regards to what these children can actually manage at this age, and it's beyond switching things on and exploring technical toys and how they're being used. I followed this child and really looked at what we call the intrinsic load and the cognitive load that this child could actually deal with. So The idea of intrinsic load is it stems from a gap between what the children understands and then the next step, looking at how we can push them on. Okay, breaking things down into smaller tasks for the child so that you can see the elements that they understand and the elements that they don't. And you tend to find that, for example, I've done some work with this little boy and he just ignored the parts that he didn't understand. Even if you asked the question and asked it in a different way, he would completely ignore the part. And I knew from his behaviours, he just wasn't ready to learn that aspect. So I would teach that activity again in a different topic, but in a slightly different ways to support him. Looking at modelling problem solving, sometimes we are able just to talk to our children and show them what they don't understand, so that the next time they approach it, they've got some kind of background on how they might tackle a problem. For example, modelling a process and getting the children to explain what they're doing is a really, really key part. And you might get children who work with you at the very beginning who won't speak to you, who have limited language skills, and it's just enabling them so that you can see through their physical development what they're actually doing, what they understand. And I tend to find, especially when I'm using things like robots in the classroom or doing activities, those children who might not necessarily have the best speech can still show you their true understanding of what they're doing through actually physically just showing you what they can achieve. We do need to be careful when we're working with these children that we don't increase the load on their cognitive skills too far, that we decompose, we break the problem down of what we want them to achieve into manageable parts. And it might be over a couple of weeks, keeping to the same objective, the same skill, but doing it in a different setting, doing it in a different way, which I'll come on to later on. And making connections between things. We can't just take for granted that our children understand what we're talking about. We have to show them. So I'm just going to move on again. There we are. So this was an activity that I set up in an early years setting. This was a nursery classroom where I had a group of children, and it was really to look at how they tackled a problem. So this was a little robot that I was using with the children, and this robot had a magnet on. The children hadn't been taught about magnets. It was an introduction to an activity. And really it was to see, one, how long they would sustain their focus, two, did they talk to each other, what were their problem solving skills. This was an introduction to an activity that I was leading up to. And I set out, we just created a maze with the children, with the bricks, all the resources I would have normally in this early years setting. And the children started turning robots over. They started looking at them. They started talking to each other about what they noticed. For example, one of the little boys on the right-hand side picked up the robot and then ran it over, pushed it over the coins, and then spotted quite quickly that one of the coins connected to the magnet. I said, well, what's happened there? And I just scaffolded the learning, but I didn't interrupt. I allowed them to show me what they thought and what their learning was. Another little boy came across and then found that one of the coins didn't get picked up, and then they spotted straight away there were some magnetic items and there were some that were not. So they automatically started using this language, and immediately there was a flurry. As soon as two boys joined, another two boys joined, and they were turn taking, and it was fantastic. It was a great opportunity for me to see what those children were capable of doing. And immediately they started to look at the robot to see if they could move the robot around. And then I intervened there and said, well, there's some instructions on that robot. What could you use? What do these arrows do? And then we started investigating the robot a little bit more. I'm just going to move on there. Different activities that you can set up linked to different topics. For example, that was robots with magnets. So I was looking at science. I was looking at properties of materials with the children. This is an activity I set up where the children started investigating music. So the quality of the interaction between myself and the children that were in this nursery setting, I asked questions, but I allowed them to explore, which was part of it, which is a key fundamental part of early years. The high quality interactions, I thought very carefully about what I was asking and the way I worded it so that I didn't overload them with information. So be very, your questioning before you enter into a conversation with the children has to be very clear. What do you want them to get out of it? Are you extending their thoughts beyond what they already know? Have you found out what they already know just through observations? And I think, especially I know from my own teaching experience, we want the children to get through things and we want them to achieve, but sometimes we have to take that step back and just really look at what they do know already and start from that point, because otherwise they're learning something they already know. Okay. And the interpretation, I tend to see things my way. but they might see it their way, and making that distinction between our thoughts are different because we tackle a problem in a different way is really important. So this was just a music activity that I set up, and I did it with a laptop. It was a makey kit, and I actually designed a scratch project where the children had to investigate different outputs. So for example, you can see the little boy here tapping different things, and he knew that when he tapped certain different things, music played, and then he started to ask if he could change the sounds, which I did with him. But that's what he asked me to do. So these are scaffolded learning activities that I've just put in place in the classroom. Again, using art. So I've used music, I've used science, I use English, I use topic related things to inspire the children. So scaffold learning activity here, where I was using an activity where the children created a piece of art. So they went away and they painted their own Van Gogh Starry Night setting in a little circle, and then we used the iPad to scan it, and it brought it to life. So these are all activities, play-based learning, that you can have a go at. I've just put a key document in there called the Pedagogy in Early Years and Childhood Education, and this is just a research brief into the why play is such an important part. I believe as well this needs to be part of Key Stage 1 classes as well. I just do believe that the children learn so much through play and scaffolded learning, scaffolded activities that incorporate the concept or the learning objective that you want to push on. So as I said,
interrupt. We've got a question coming in that's just come in, and it says, what app did you use for the pictures?
It was an app on the iPad called Quiver. And Quiver, on the actual app, what you can do is download little documents. So there's lots of little documents that you can download and just print them off as a PDF off your iPad or off your computer. And then what you do is you can use that as a template to draw things onto. So for example, this one was just a spherical ball that I knew that would come to life. It would come into a 3D simulation. And then what the children did is they just literally drew on their circle. They created their picture. They mixed colours. We didn't recreate Starry Night, but we just used the colours, the blues, the different blues, and blended them all together. And then the children scanned it, and it just brings it up and brings it into life. I did it for comic relief as well with Pudsey Bear and Pudsey Danced. So it's just things like this that you can do with the children as part of a rotation of activities, and it combines art, it combines technology, but it brings their work to life. And they were just amazed at how it worked. So it's a good activity to be using with them, and it enhances what they're doing. I'll move on. Just if there's any more questions, please feel free to put them into the chat, and then Wendy will kind of ask me to reference them. So I do a lot of learning with books, topic related teaching. I do lots of things with Billy Goat Gruff. These are all early years activities, and I've extended this into nursery up into reception and year 1 and year 2, depending on the topics I'm teaching. You can see this little boy here using one of these robots here, which I've put on the presentation, but he's just using the Mind robot. And because he was at a point where he was able to use all the arrows and he understood what they did physically on the robot, I then pushed him onto using the app, which is a free app that goes with this robot, the Clementonia Mind robot. So he had to direct this robot round the maze in a kind of free play mode where he was just asking it to go forward and backwards and turning. I never used left and right in early years, generally just because I asked them which way it's going to turn, and I get them to show me. If they're ready for left and right, then I would push them on a little bit further. But they had to go around a maze and collect things. They had to collect grass for the goat to eat so that he could get across the bridge. When he'd eaten all the grass on his side, he then had to get across the bridge to the other side, which the children were retelling the story and acting out the trolls. So it was fantastic for role play as well. Another activity I've done in autumn where the robots became squirrels and had to go around and collect as many acorns as they could. We did things like put obstacles in the way so that they had to rethink their routes. And the children absolutely loved it. They were really, really eager to do it. Pushing children on and thinking about, they've understood this, where would I go next with these children? Having rotational activities. I've done this where I've had in a reception classroom, I've had 4 activities running and the children move around the activities, so that if one activity doesn't suit their learning style, then they move on to the next one and it does, so that you can get this sense of unplugged resources and then some plugged resources, or all about one topic. So for example, we did pirates, and this little boy had to go around and collect things like jellyfish. He had a little islands, and he had to go and collect the jewels for the pirates so that his pirate could go back with his treasure. And they used all the robots to do this. So this was very much kind of pushing this idea of the control aspect of computing. Things like the unplugged resources, Lego boards are fantastic. Duplo, or if you've got children who have got that fine motor skill, using the little Lego, I've done it with 3.5, 4-year-olds, and I've said, right, this fish needs to get from this side of the board to this side of the board. How's he going to get through? Remember, there's sharks, so he can't just go straight through. How's he going to do it? And the children start to make their little maze, and then you can put sharks in the way and add that layer of kind of context, or pushing them a little bit more and say, oh, well, now there's 4 sharks, how are you going to get through this? And they start to build the roots up with their Lego. Building things as well is really key, fundamental part. You know, can you use 10 bricks? How are we going to build a house out of these 10 bricks? Which brick do you want me to use first? And they start, if you start modeling the language, they become accustomed to it. It's just second nature, and it helps them with their understanding of instructions, especially when I've had classes where I've literally had to say 3 words: coat, door, shoes. And that's all that they can take on. So all of the language that we use in between, if we model this at an earlier stage, I think children understand it a lot more. Moving on, so characteristics of effective learning.
We've got a couple of questions just before you move
Yes.
on. Yes, one was the name of the robot that you referred to.
So a little bit later on in this presentation, I've put all of the labels next to all of the robots. So I've kind of identified what they are. And the reason I use these robots is I've been a computing coordinator since the beginning of my career. And when I looked in magazines for resources, some of the resources were £100 per robot, and I simply couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to keep the batteries replaced. So these are all robots that I'll show you that I tend to use in my teaching. They are really robust as well. These have been dropped. I've had these for over 3 years now, and they're fantastic. So this is the Clementoni Mind, and this is the Clementoni Dock, and they are very, very much like the B robots, but they're an awful lot cheaper. So I'll go through that a little bit later with you. So I've got all these resources here, and I can show you those as well.
And one more question.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the other question was, please, can you explain the difference between what you mean by a plugged activity and an unplugged activity?
So unplugged resources, a plugged activity is something where you are fundamentally using some kind of tech. So it might be an iPad, it might be a laptop, it might even be a robot like this. But sometimes you can teach activities unplugged, which means you don't have to have any tech. So for example, somebody referred earlier on that they just used unplugged resources. This unplugged resource that I've got on the screen at the minute, which is the Lego boards, it doesn't involve any technology, but it involves all the computational thinking of being a computational thinker, tinkering, modeling, persevering, all these aspects of computational thinking, using computing in your classroom. It uses all those fundamental skills that the children need to learn as they go up through school. So for example, I might just say on this Lego board, oh, can you create a pathway from one side to the other to get this pirate from one side to the other, because there's sharks in the water, and they build the route. Right, well, this shark's come across and he's eaten this part of the Lego board. Can you find another way around? And the children then start to build their bricks and they move around. Some children think out of the box and they build bridges. And it's just layering these types of activities. You can do this with dance activities as well. Developing a dance, right? Well, you know, can we think of 4 dance moves that we might want to do for this particular dance? Can you show me one of them? Or what's number 2? What's number 3? So we're going to do them in order, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you start building algorithms with the children, and don't be frightened of using the language with the children. I use the word algorithm. I use the word code with the children. So all these things that we're doing, we're modeling to them, but we're doing it in a way. Unplugged just means that we don't have to necessarily have all that expensive gear to do it with. So I hope I've explained that, and I'll probably come on to it a little bit more later. So looking at playing and exploring, active learning, it doesn't have to be at a desk. Even when I'm in Key Stage 2, I don't use desks all the time. I think children need to be moved, they need to be mobile, they need to be active. Creative, linking it to topics that you're doing. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel and create brand new topics for teaching computing, link it to what you're already doing. And if I've got time, I'll quickly show you a few of the resources I've got in front of me here. Does it allow exploration? Is it meaningful to the children? Is it linked to what they actually like to do? Does it give the children a chance to use practical skills, and are they absorbed in their learning? And you spot straight away. So this is where I'm going to just quickly, this is something I made up for the early years. This is something that over 4 years of watching children, especially in control, I've just done it for control so far. These are the things, so from left to right, it moves across left to right, and these are the key things I'd expect at the very, very beginning of introducing control to children. And then by the time they are ready for kind of really reception, these are the types of things these children were doing. Being estimate how far a robot needs to travel, understanding when a robot's looking at me, it's doing the opposite action. Developing more fluency in tackling a problem, not always asking lots of questions or looking a bit blank. They tended to just get in there and have a go without any kind of help from me. Combining buttons and developing an algorithm, they were doing this. These children that I've shown you were doing this without, without my support, including turns. Confidently using language. They started at the very beginning, they didn't really speak to me, but by the end they would come over and, oh, it's going this way, it's going this, and we used lots of modeling. Is it going forwards? Is it going backwards, so that I can't see where it's going? Is it going to turn? And when it turns, is it moving forward? No, it's not. It's just turning. It's just looking that way. So we built in all these key fundamental bits of language, and it just helped the children with their general day-to-day instructions. So all of these are available to you on the PDF, so you can have a look through. So this was the child, one of the children that I watched. This was him at 2.5, and this is him now at 4 years old. And it's a complete contrast in understanding. He's very, very able. He's very motivated, and he's a motivated independent learner. He doesn't necessarily need me there to guide him as much. I just scaffold him and I add that next layer of understanding. So what types of activities interest boys in your classroom? If you want to put that into the chat, and then Wendy will just read out a few to me. What types of activities are the boys interested in your setting?
Just while that's happening, I'm just letting you know that we've got about 10 minutes left, Vicki.
Yeah, I'll fly through as quickly as I can just to...
No problem. We also had a question about whether it's possible to have a copy of the EYFS control mapping development that you produced.
Yeah, I can definitely. And this is from experience. This is from what I've done. I've worked with children every week on activities.
Lots of answers coming in. We've got games, mazes, remote control cars, water play, iPads.
The reason I've put this in, and it's always a bit of a funny one when I do talk about it, and I do, when I've observed, and this is in a number of settings, there is a difference between boys and girls and how they learn at the very beginning when they join in. So for example, boys tend to be more hands-on, climbing, touching, building, taking things apart. Not all boys like that you do have exceptions, but as a whole, that tends to be what you find. Girls are more compliant, play closer to adults, lots of role play. So when I designed activities, I had to be really, really aware of the types of activities that would bring the girls and the boys in together. So I'm just going to fly through a couple of the things. This is all part of the presentation, so you can take this away with you. So really making sure that activities are linked to what they're interested in. I did a lot of work with Spheros, with paint for girls, or activities where they were drawing. They loved it and they were really keen. And some of the robots that I'm showing you, that they have all these facilities in them. So just to kind of give you an idea of different things and how it supports the learner. For example, I had a lot of children. I'll just show you this document, this little thing here called the Osmo. This is something I used with boys who didn't like writing, who would not come and draw, who didn't like to pick up pencils. Some girls as well that needed that fine motor skill. And the idea of this was it encouraged, there was a little bear in it that talks to the children, that asks them to draw things, and the drawing gets sucked up into the iPad and it displays on the screen. And this supported my little boy in terms of writing. He's a really good, he's a very strong writer now, and he loves drawing. And I think it was just that early sense of using these types of equipment. So I'm just going to quickly fly through just because I'm aware of time. These are all the different robots that I've used in an earlier setting. I don't go and buy robots from the Hope magazine. I'm sorry to say that, just because I've only got a certain budget and I just can't afford them. So for example, I've got the Caterpillar, which is about £40, good for the earlier setting. Pushing on from that, I've got the dock, which I just showed you before. These are discontinued, but you can still get these really easily, and they're about £30, £40, and you can get these off Amazon, and they come with mats and all sorts of little activities, but you can create your own. We've got the Clementoni Mind, about again £40. Again, this robot does a lot. I've used this from early years right up into year 4, because it you can set it on the iPad to do things like, if you want to create an algorithm, you can tell how far you want it to travel and what angle you want it to turn at. It does tangrams, so you can draw things with it and use shape and send it to the robot, and the robot will actually draw it by putting a pen in here. There's so much scope to it, so I would recommend that you have a look at this one on. It's even got a microphone and you can speak to it, tell it what to do. Again, we've got on the far side, we've got the Ozobots. They're fantastic at getting children to pick up a pen and draw. Different colours, it'll do different things, and as you move on, you can start to download programs and actually get it to turn right, turn left, turn around, speed up, slow down, and you can use the iPad as well to control these. These are just all these types of robots. I've used robots where I've turned them into chefs. Use the equipment that you've got in your room, because earlier settings are fantastic. They're just a chasm of loads of resources that you can just use. So sand trays, I have had spheros going through, so the children had to use a paintbrush and decide where he was going to travel. And then if he didn't roll, they had to get more sand out the way, so it was using that paintbrush. Again, on the right hand side, you've got the little boy who is using the Mind robot to draw. So he's drawing key shapes and then getting them to colour them in. I had the girls busy with this for about an hour, and I had to ask them to leave because they wouldn't leave. They wanted to carry on and they were really engaged. Different resources, again, walkie-talkies, torches. Children love torches. Anything that you can put out that the children can look after, but they have it accessible to use. Cameras. My little boy loves cameras. Setting up dens for them so that they can go and get a book and read. This is all technology that is at our hands, and if you might not think it is, but it is really practical in terms of setting it up in your room and getting the children to look after it as well. Cooking, using blenders, using microwaves, music, using keyboards. These are all key things that's part of the computing curriculum that let them tinker and let them understand that something has an output. When I touch a button, something happens. It doesn't just have to be toys. It can be practical things in the environment that you've got, and setting up areas where children can take things apart, having a look at keyboards, how they're designed. If you've got old keyboards, I know obviously there's, the aspect that the children might put things in their mouth, but you can set these things up where it's a scaffolded activity and you can watch the children. Microscopes, easy speak microphones, digital microphones where the children can talk into them. Obviously these things are a little bit more expensive and you wouldn't have lots of them, but you can have one or two, or one maybe. And just at the very end, because I'm aware of time here, and I know Wendy will probably jump in with some questions. These are all apps that I use. Most of them are free. These are all iPad apps, and there's lots out there that link to Android as well. Code Carts is a fantastic one for pre-coding, really good. Busy Bundle, you can get that for free, or you can pay £1.99 for the full bundle, and it's dressing characters up. It might be number skills, it might be deciding how a helicopter moves to go and save a cow by using arrows and getting it to move. You've got Keysy here, which is brilliant for instructions. You might get children who don't want to use it straight away, but will happily watch how you use it and have a go. And the idea is that you tap on the colour block and it records, so you can create music with this. So you can record beats, and then the children press the buttons and then it will play it back to them. Or you can do, I've done this with instructions, and the children have had to work out the order of the instructions and what to do first. Oh, it's the green one first, it's the red one. So you're already teaching colour, but you're also teaching speaking and listening, and you're also teaching tech as well. Puppet Pals 2, there's Puppet Pals and there's Puppet Pals 2. Puppet Pals 2 is much different, is a lot different if you've never seen it before. Very interactive animation where you can get characters to move by using your finger. So these are all key skills that we're using, getting the children to use their fine motor skills. And with voice recording as well, getting the children to listen back to their voices. Code Safari, if you want to teach habitats, if you want to teach what animals eat. this is fantastic, because you have to create pathways to water or create pathways to shelter, and you have to get the foxes there or the polar bears there or the penguins, and it levels up, so it gets quite tricky. And these are more chatter picks, allows you to take pictures and add voiceovers. Book Creator, another fantastic one, for creating digital books. iMotion, I've done this with I've done this with nursery, where I've used green screens and they've recreated a nursery rhyme, and then we've just put it all together. And or we've done iMotion, where they've had puppets and they take pictures of their puppets and they move them, take pictures, and it's that idea of them talking and communicating with somebody else. Another one I've used really for my child as well is magic letters and numbers. It is for creating formation of numbers. It's brilliant, and letters. And my child is going into reception in September, and he knows all of his letters, and he can make them, as he can draw them as well and write them. So it's just things like this that encapsulates them. And all the Dr. Panda apps, I don't know if you've seen these, but I think Dr. Panda apps you can get for £5. I think you can get about 10 of them. Fantastic, and they link to being a post cooking, being a mechanic, being a doctor, being a vet. They create things, they can make meals, and they decide what's going to go in the meals. It's fantastic. There's loads on there that you can use. Doing green screening, GarageBand music and Launchpad, fantastic for pressing buttons and deciding what comes out. If they like it, they can add to it, add layers. And all of this you would scaffold with children and develop it with them, and it's instant, so they get a reaction straight away from pressing something on the screen and it being meaningful, rather than it being what we call a digital babysitter. These are activities I do with children, and it brings them on, and they're really engaged, and they understand tempo, they understand, a rhythm and what we mean by a rhythm, or whether they like something or they don't like it and have an opinion. So I think at the end I've just popped that screen up there for you. I think it's moved through. Can you see at the very end, can you see my
what we can see at the moment is the robots that you've been referring to, with the names of them. That's the slide that we see. There we go.
So these are all things. Sorry, I thought this had it was going on my screen, so I'll just quickly flick through them in the last couple of minutes just so you can see. These are all microphones.
Is it possible to share this presentation at the end? Some people were having some issues with the handout. They couldn't quite see all the lovely things that you've been talking about. So that's great. We'll send a copy out to all the attendees shortly after the webinar ends. So thank you for that. There's a couple of questions for you, Vicki. We've got a couple of minutes left.
Absolutely.
One was a question about what brand is the green iPad holder that's in one of the photos that you had up. The person was saying it looks very robust.
Oh, they're fantastic. I haven't had an iPad smash since I've had these on, and I've had my iPads 3 years. I just got this, I can find the link for you if I send it over to you, Wendy, and I can send it out. But I think I just got these off the internet, but I specifically got a rubber-based one that I could use for animation because it stands up and the children can walk around with it in their hands. And even if they drop it, I haven't had an iPad broken yet. So they are really, really robust. The only thing I'd say is check out your iPad trolley, because depending on iPad trolleys, the base is quite thick. So it depends on the iPad trolley that you've got and how you store your iPads. It might not fit in, but there are some that are very similar that have got the handlebars on each side, but they haven't got necessarily the same base.
Thank you. And the final question was to do with the issue of technology and whether it's actually included in the EYFS curriculum in September.
We've, for example, going back to just this document here that I created, when I looked at the early years curriculum, it's even before it's possibly being taken out, it was literally, do the children show an interest, and can they switch things on and off? And I think that if we are fundamentally doing our children a disservice if we don't have these kind of activities in our classrooms, because one, it engages their learning, two, it motivates them to want to do it, it adds that extra dimension to what you're teaching as well, because it's an intrinsic part of their life. When they are getting jobs in their future careers, they're going to have technology as part of it. So if we take it away from them at such an early age, I'm not saying it has to be done every day and all day, but even once a week, having those kind of activities that they can go and have a look at, and you'll find that you can engage those learners an awful lot more. And I've had children that are really keen to come over, or know that that's, you know, Mrs. Dodds is in on a Monday and she's going to do this with me, and they ask if I'm not there for some reason, they ask why I'm not there and why I'm not doing these types of activities. So I'd say it's just because it's not in the objectives we need to teach, does that mean that we can't teach it all, that we shouldn't? So it's, personally, in my opinion, I believe we should, because I just think it's fundamentally such a massive part of their learning and their engagement, and, you know, for their future careers as well. So hopefully I've persuaded you.
Yeah, we've just lost you off the top of the screen there, but I just wanted to end by saying thank you for joining us today. A special thanks to you, Vicki, for presenting. So difficult for me to choose my personal highlight, because lots of fantastic ideas that you shared this morning, but I particularly liked the project-based learning using the Clementoni robots. So that looked fantastic. Please share your highlights via social media and the CAS website. At the end of this webinar, a short survey will appear on the screen, and we'd be grateful if you would take a minute to complete the survey. And in about a week's time, you'll receive an email with a CPD certificate confirming your attendance at this session. Coming up this afternoon, we've got some sessions on Google Classroom, the National Centre for Computing Education, and the CS Accelerator course. And a recording of this webinar will be available on the CAS website in the near future. We hope to see you at other sessions in the showcase, and please do continue to spread the word about the first ever CAS Virtual Showcase. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.